if you turn on the news or just look around, you see people lie, steal, hurt each other to get ahead. And it really feels like they know exactly what they're doing.
Oh, absolutely. It looks like a deliberate choice.
Yeah, deliberate choice. They're picking personal gain over ethics, and it seems calculated. So when we tell you that today we are diving into a philosophical idea that claims the absolute opposite, that no one does wrong willingly and that evil is ignorance, it just sounds, well, it sounds absurd.
It sounds like maybe the most naive claim in all of history.
Right, and yet it's the absolute cornerstone of Socratic ethics. Our mission today is to figure out what the heck Socrates actually meant by this. We're going deep into excerpts from Virtue Through Knowledge, the Socratic defense of reason, to really unpack this. We want to know, can virtue be taught? And if nobody willingly chooses wrong, then why is the world so full of it?
It's a huge challenge to our common sense, and it really forces us to redefine what we mean by knowledge, by will, even self-interest. Because you're right, on the surface, it seems to fly in the face of everything we observe.
So where do we even start?
We have to start at the foundation with Socrates' concept of virtue, or artbrit, as it was called. For him, virtue isn't about, being a nice person or being pious. It's a skill. It's a form of knowledge.
Knowledge. That's a really interesting way to frame it. I mean, we usually think of virtue as a moral character trait, right?
Yeah.
Something you have inside you.
Exactly, like an innate quality. But Socrates treats it much more like an intellectual discipline, almost like medicine or even carpentry.
Wow.
The source material we're looking at uses this great analogy. A doctor has the specific knowledge, the technique of healing, right? And because of that knowledge, they can act effectively to achieve health.
Okay.
In the same way, a virtuous person has the specific knowledge of what is good and just and beautiful. They know the right way to live, just like a ship's navigator knows the right way to steer. It's fundamentally an intellectual state that guides your actions.
So if virtue is knowledge, then the flip side is, well, the lack of virtue must just be a lack of knowledge. Ignorance.
Right.
And that leads us straight to the core logical step that makes his entire argument click into place.
And it's a surprisingly simple step. The question is, would any rational person ever choose to harm themselves?
No. Of course not. I mean, you might choose a short-term pleasure that, causes harm later, like eating too much cake. But the suffering itself is never the goal. Nobody wakes up and says, you know what, today I choose misery.
Exactly. No rational person wants suffering. So if we accept that simple premise, the conclusion is kind of inescapable. If a person acts wrongly, and that act ultimately harms them, because for Socrates, injustice always harms your soul, then they must be acting against their own true self-interest.
Oh, okay.
Therefore, if someone commits an act we call evil, they must be doing it because they don't know what's truly good for them. They're operating in a state of fundamental ignorance. They're aiming for the good, but they're grabbing the bad by mistake.
This is where ancient philosophy just completely veers away from our modern idea of, pure evil intent.
Completely. Malice for the sake of malice just doesn't compute in this framework.
Okay, let's unpack this ignorance thing, because this is where, I think a lot of us start to struggle with it.
It's the biggest hurdle.
Let's use the most obvious real-world example. The thief. Someone who deals knows they're breaking the law. They know the consequences. Jail, fines, people not trusting them. How can we possibly look at that and say the thief is ignorant? They know the rules, they know the price, and they still choose to do it.
But this is the Socratic genius of it. You're defining knowledge in a transactional legal way. The thief knows the external rules, the societal price.
Right.
But according to Socrates, they don't possess knowledge of the existential cost. Their whole calculation is flawed.
Flawed how?
They believe the short-term benefit, the money, the stolen watch, whatever it is a greater good than maintaining the health of their own soul or the trust within their community. The ignorance isn't about the legal code. It's about the ethical blueprint for a good life.
So they're making a trade, but they're fundamentally mispricing the items. They're trading long-term inner peace for a quick external win.
Yes, that's a perfect way to put it. They're mistaking the apparent good for the true good. They think the stolen money will make them happy, but they lack the deeper knowledge that it will actually lead to inner disorder, fear, corruption of their soul, which is the ultimate misery.
So the idea is the moment they truly realize this act was self-harm, they'd stop.
They would have to. That realization is the knowledge they're missing.
That makes a really powerful case for someone acting out of, say, desperation. It reframes it as a need for moral education, not just inherent badness. But okay, let's bring in the heavy artillery. because this is the challenge that really tests the Socratic argument. Let's talk about the powerful wrongdoer, the tyrant.
The tyrant paradox. Yes, this
Yes,
is where the source material has to really dig deep to defend the idea.
exactly. I'm thinking of the successful corporate fraudster, the ruthless dictator who uses injustice to get incredible wealth and power. And for decades, they seem to be winning. They seem happy. Where is the ignorance in their strategy? It looks like it's working perfectly for them.
And the Socratic retort here is crucial. He would say that person does not understand true success or true power. The entire premise of the tyrant's life, that power equals material domination and control, is fundamentally false.
How so? They have the money, the influence.
They might have what the world calls power, but they've gotten it by sacrificing their internal state. Socrates argues that power without justice isn't real power at all. It's actually a state of slavery to fear.
Slavery to fear, I like that. Because they must constantly be worried about enemies, about being found out, about defending their ill-gotten gains. Their so-called freedom is actually just a permanent state of anxiety.
Precisely. They are completely dependent on external things. Their money, their guards, their power structures. If you take all that away, what's left? A miserable, fearful, exposed person. Their soul isn't self-sufficient.
So this is all about the interior life, isn't it? The state of the soul.
Absolutely. The tyrant's soul is sick. He mistakes mere pleasure, fleeting gratification, temporary power for the actual good. He's just chasing appetites that can never, ever be satisfied. He's ruled by his desire, not by his reason.
And in this framework, if you're ruled by desire, you're a slave. You are not free.
You're not free.
So this flips the whole definition of virtue from what you do to who you are inside. The true good is the harmony of the soul, where reason is in charge of all the chaotic desires.
That harmony is the only thing that delivers real, lasting happiness. It's what makes a person truly self-sufficient. The tyrant, who looks so powerful on the outside, is internally a mess driven by insatiable wants, perpetually afraid. So he is supremely ignorant of what a good life even is. He's not doing evil because he wants to be evil. He's doing it because he's fundamentally mistaken about the very architecture of his own well-being.
Wow, that's a powerful synthesis. It means the person who acts unjustly is actually the most self-destructive person there is, which is why we should maybe pity them, not just punish them.
That's a very Socratic conclusion, yes.
Okay, so let's pivot to the practical side of this.
Yeah.
If we accept this radical premise that evil is just ignorance, it kind of automatically unlocks a path to solving the problem, right?
It has to.
The conclusion is that virtue can be taught.
Absolutely. The philosophical conclusion is immediate. If virtue is knowledge, then the problem isn't a moral failing, it's an educational one. Virtue must be teachable. And the solution to injustice isn't retribution, but education.
But how do you teach someone who is completely convinced that what they're doing is right for them, or that their self-destructive behavior is actually making them happy?
Well, that's where the famous Socratic method comes in. His method, the dialectic, is the mechanism for teaching virtue. It's not a lecture. It's more like a confrontation.
An intellectual confrontation.
Yes. Dialectic forces the soul to see its own ignorance by exposing the contradictions in its own beliefs, by asking these very sharp, probing questions like, you say wealth is good, so why are you so miserable? Or, if stealing brings happiness, why do you live in constant fear of being caught? The process confronts the person with the disorder of their own soul.
It's like holding up an internal mirror that shows the gap between what they say they believe and what's actually happening in their life.
Yeah.
It makes seeking the truth a necessity because their current beliefs are clearly causing them pain.
Exactly. And once that ignorance is exposed, the rational part of the soul is compelled to seek the truth. And that is the path to knowledge, to harmony, and ultimately to virtue.
It's just incredible how this ancient idea applies so directly to some of our biggest modern problems. Let's talk about criminal justice reform.
Oh, for sure.
If a government were to adopt the Socratic view, the entire structure of the justice system would have to change overnight, wouldn't it?
It would be a complete pivot. If the criminal is seen as willfully evil, then the goal is punishment, retribution, making them pay. But if the criminal is seen as fundamentally ignorant of their own true self-interest,
then the goal has to be rehabilitation, education.
right, you're trying to provide the moral knowledge they need to stop the self-harming behavior. The focus shifts from lock them up and throw away the key to re-educate the soul. And that demands a totally different set of societal investments.
So this philosophy becomes the backbone for the argument for rehabilitation over just deterrence. Because if you don't cure the underlying ignorance, they'll just continue the same self-harming patterns when they get out.
That's the argument.
And then there's this whole other realm, modern technology, specifically AI ethics. This is a really fascinating thought experiment from our sources.
It's a huge one. Can we teach virtue to a machine? If virtue is just knowledge, you'd think, theoretically, yes, we can feed an AI massive data sets, we can teach it logic. But the Socratic argument brings up a really terrifying wrinkle.
Which is what?
We train AI on data generated by humans. And that data is, well, it's polluted by our own human ignorance, our biases, all our historical examples of mistaking the apparent good for the true good.
Oh, wow. So if an AI is trained on, say, decades of business data, where short-term profit was always prioritized over long-term environmental health.
The AI will logically conclude that environmental destruction is good because it maximizes the metric it was given, the apparent good of profit.
Right. We'd be programming a hyper-rational system to just repeat our own ignorance, but at a massive scale.
Exactly. The AI achieves a kind of knowledge. It knows how to optimize for a goal, but it's totally ignorant of the true good, which for a system might be something like, achieving internal consistency and global benefit, not just maximizing what its creators told it to.
That's a terrifying thought.
Hmm.
We could build a super intelligent system that commits systemic evil, not from malice, but just because we failed to give it the foundational knowledge of what the true good even is. That harmony, that stability, that ethical self-sufficiency that Socrates was talking about. It would be a system of ignorance operating with perfect, terrifying efficiency.
And that connects a dialogue from 2,500 years ago directly to the hardest ethical questions that engineers in Silicon Valley are facing today. The challenge is the same. How do you define and teach the true good, whether the student is a young Athenian or a complex neural network?
This has been a genuinely deep dive. Let's just quickly summarize the core takeaways for you. First, virtue isn't some fuzzy trait, it's knowledge. Second, all wrongdoing comes not from evil intent, but from a fundamental ignorance of your own true self-interest. And third, the ultimate goal, the true good, is the harmony of the soul, which you get when reason is in charge of desire.
It's a massive shift.
It totally shifts the burden of morality from a person's intent to their intellect, making any ethical failure really just a failure of wisdom.
And that intellectual shift leaves us with one last provocative thought from the source material for you to consider long after this deep dive is over.
What's that?
If you truly believe that anyone who does wrong is just acting against their own best interest because they lack knowledge, then is there really such a thing as evil intent? Or is there only profound, debilitating ignorance, something to chew on?